Hello and welcome to another Clifton's Clicks, your Cliff Notes to the Cosmos. And as always, I am your host, Clifton Smith. And today is a special holiday edition that I wanted to add as a appendix or an addendum to what I had been talking about because I finally received the information um, about currency. And as you may recall, one of the previous episodes, I talked about how I was just meditating on what my guru Paramahansa Nityananda was talking about with currency. Is that currency is the thought current that currently, is being held. And so I want to dive into that because it finally made sense, and it finally created the levers that brought tears to my eyes. And I think today's sponsor is the Sri Chakra. Yes, the chakra mandala. It uses sacred geometry. Yesterday, I mentioned it about how the Merkaba uses these shapes in a three-dimensional capacity in order to combine both electro frequency, like just frequency, and then electromagnetism in two tetrahedrons in the shape of a Star of David. And the Sri Chakra is the build out of that in a two-dimensional space that is even more complex. And we call it octaves because it works in groups of 8, like the octaves of a piano. So, as always, I greet you with my love, respect, gratitude, appreciation, and motivation, and wanted to share with you about currency. And so, currency, as I mentioned before, you can create a currency. And the intention behind that currency and what it represents is an important consideration and component to the currency. So, for example, the United States dollar is all based on debt. And in a way, it's callable by force, by violence, by the military protection mechanisms of the United States and the law enforcement that we've constructed in our government. We have a free, open society, but it has very restrictive and explicit laws and how you can operate. And that's what that currency really is about. And there's this discussion about cryptocurrency, right? Bitcoin. And Bitcoin, you essentially mine Bitcoin through processing power, processing units that are able to do specific algorithms and functions. And what that actually does, and it, of course, it's on the blockchain, which is a great technology, which is open, and everyone has the chain, and it's its own whole world that we're exploring. But Bitcoin, specifically the mining, what that actually is it's backed by processing power, and processing power simply means that it benefits the investment and research and development of more processing power, because you've been able to find a currency that supports the processing power. And what that does is that supports the narrative of the development of robots, because the more processing power you have, the more you're able to hit that tipping point of really creating artificial, intelligent, and sentient robots out there. And so that might be a little bit of a shock for people. But if you back Bitcoin, you're backing the development of robots. The other thing is if you dive deep in a little bit further, is in order to run all these processing units and these computer terminals that are doing the mining, that is creating the value of this Bitcoin, it requires a lot of energy. And on one level, what that's doing is that's allowing people to play arbitrage and take advantage of areas that have cheap, accessible energy. So you have places in remote Russia and China that are able to generate a higher profit on the mining capabilities, because the cost for the electricity is cheaper, as well as heat, right? So if you're in a cold place, you have all these computers producing all this heat. You need it cooled, and so if you're in a climate that is naturally cool, you save on cooling costs. And one of the interesting components, though, of this is when you look at it from a global perspective, it's creating a huge demand for establishing more and more power plants. And that helps establish different communities around the world and specific developments. And that's a positive aspect of this. However, the negative aspect is in certain areas that are wishing to be developed, you build a power plant. And what you have is you have Bitcoin miners buy up a huge amount of it for a specific cheap price for a period of time. And for like say 20 years, you get a very good deal. And what it does is it sucks up a lot of the capacity of that power plant, and it creates a high enough demand that it inflates the price of the electricity, and as well as deflates it in certain situations. Which, when you start to play with the price of energy, what you're actually doing is you are playing with the tipping point adoption rate of solar energy being acceptable. And when you have such a high demand and not as much supply of electricity, of course, these are regulated. Power and water, things like that are regulated. But for emerging countries and emerging developments, it makes the adoption of solar power much more challenging, because you have such a huge demand putting on the grid. So it's an interesting component. And when you look at currency, it's just a unit that's backed by something. But really what makes it matter is that you're exchanging it, right? Like these mandalas could be a currency in some environment. Like, oh, give me 4 blues and an orange, and I'll give you this one. It's a currency, but it's simply a unit of exchange. And what matters, besides what is backed behind, which is an important consideration, it's kind of like the intentionality, it's the thought current that you get exchanged that currency for. So when I meditated on this and thought about it over and over and over again, it's almost so obvious what our currency values, the thought current that we value. And it's efficiency and cost effectiveness. Like, the cheaper the thing, the more likely we're going to go and buy it. Like, if we're on Amazon, how are we going to purchase what we're going to purchase? We're going to purchase the cheapest one. If we're looking at places to buy a specific item, we look at the one that gets to us the fastest. So we reward, and the thought current we're cherishing is lowest price and fastest delivery. And then when we invest and we pick which projects to take on, our main consideration is profitability. And what's great is that there's been an elevated currency or thought current that we're starting to value for doing things like social enterprise projects, in which those companies, they're thinking not just of profitability, profit maximization, or expense mitigation or efficiency. They're thinking about the global picture, or more and more stakeholders, not just shareholders. And that is a beautiful consideration. However, it's still in itself artificially limited and is being compared by many investors as the main point is profitability. And so what's great is there's specific entities in which there are funds specifically allocated for projects that have a much greater impact on society, the environment, etc., than just for pure profitability. And these social impact funds are one such token. And of course, the necessity of these companies and what makes these types of companies run and operate is that they are profitable, right? Maybe not profit maximizing, but they are profitable, which means they can sustain themselves. And one of the interesting things is, how do they sustain themselves after that initial capital outlay or investment by banks or investors? Is they make money. And how do they make money? Because they are providing a good or service that resonates with specific people in the collective consciousness that holds that share the similar thought current. So, for example, if I'm a baker and I'm selling bread, then my thought current is people like bread, people want to eat, people eat food, people eat bread, right? That thought current is so established in our day to day, it's so blatantly obvious. But for some people who are breatharians or are a little more particular in their lifestyles, then that thought current won't resonate with them, and they'll go, you know what, I don't need to spend this money or use this energy for bread. And I know that might sound crazy, but this is really where, if you can remove yourself from the most obvious, in our face views of reality, that's how you can start to see how our currency flows and operates. And so another example of this is that when I talked about when you own stock, you are a shareholder. The CEO of that company works for you. When you are a citizen of the United States and you vote for the president is your public servant. Same thing for how you use your money. Your money is how you decide how you operate and choose what kind of life you wish to live based on your purchasing decisions. And so just as much as you want to receive contracts and open up bank accounts in that powerful state of mind, use your money in that same fashion, in which you may be being like, I need to eat and I would like to eat an apple. Well, what kind of thought currents are you also supporting when you go and buy that apple? When you buy that apple from a grocery store, you're supporting that grocery store's organization, intention, and energy, as well as the farmer and the distribution play that brought the apple there. And so one of the things to think about is the money that you're using, or the currency that you use, to move beyond simply just buying the most cost efficient or cost effective, but also to be very intentional with what kind of vibrations and energy and reality you wish to support. So it may be that an apple at its base core, the cheapest you could make it, say, is $1 for an apple for simplicity's sake. And yes, you can go to the supermarket that just mass produces apples and has all this other junk food in those stores, and you can spend that dollar for that apple. Or you could say, hey, you know what's better is organic, sustainable growing practices and a eco-friendly distribution play. And so, there happens to be this grocery store that sells an organic local apple that has an eco-friendly model that offsets its carbon footprint, and it's $1.10 or $1.25. So then you, as an enlightened consumer, needs to consider whether or not living in a world in which organic produce is the norm, and in which we are eco-friendly, saving the environment, is something that you care about. Is that worth 10 cents in that moment? Is it worth an extra 25 cents in that moment? And one of the interesting points is that this all comes down to our health. Because while we take the short-term view of people saying, no, we need to reduce our costs, get the most cost-efficient produce, and maybe there's not much of a difference nutritionally or energetically with organic and non-organic, which there is, but maybe they don't they don't necessarily want to hear that argument. You simply say, well, then that 10 cents that you're spending now, or that 25 cents that you're spending now, or not spending now, you are going to be spending in the future at the hospital in your health, because your health will be impacted. Why? Because you will be working for a ecosystem and an environment that is all about mass production and cost effectiveness and efficiency, which means they're going to be maximizing you and being the most cost effective towards you and your life. And you're going to run into specific issues of burnout and stress, which is going to lead to chronic illness down the line, and you're going to have to deal with it in the hospital with a heart attack or stroke or high blood pressure at some point. So you are simply actually deferring and delaying that cost, and that cost actually with our current system is far more expensive in the long run to take that shortcut in the short run, and then you have to deal with it in the hospital later. And for some people and for society, for us to get to this point, it was absolutely necessary for us to take that short-term gain and then pay for it later on. But we are at that point and that ability to really recognize that we as consumers are what shape our world. And even something as small as a penny or a dollar is how we can day to day, in the now, in the present moment, start to shift and elevate the vibe of our ecosystem. And one of the challenges that a lot of people in this energetic space have is the barrier or distaste for this concept of business and the concept of selling and the concept of customers or of consumers. And what I'm expressing and the vernacular I'm using from a vibrational perspective is that what you are doing with money, of course, you have to alchemize how you receive the money and alchemize the intention of why that money is there and why you're using it. But you use that money, that energy, to start to make those micro investments in the future. You don't have to be some millionaire or invest in some stock market or some equity trading to actually start to create the future you wish to have. I mean, the whole point of investing and saving and investing in stocks and companies is to grow your capital to be able to live the life you wish to live. And they call it retirement, but and they're postponing the future that you want to have. But you can bring that future now without having to go through the traditional Roth IRA or 401k investment, because what is the future that you wish to provide? Of course, we are thinking about the future in our present current state and seeing what it would be like to be 65, or looking to our elders and thinking, yeah, it would be great to be, when I'm 65 and in his or her shoes, to be able to have a nest egg, so that way I can afford, my long-term health insurance, so that I can go on like Carnival cruises, and so I can, go live in Florida and retire. But the world is changing so rapidly that by the time you get to 65, it'll be completely different. And it is completely different year in and year out. And so the question is, what kind of future do you wish to have when you're 65? And I guarantee you, millennials have been pushing this for a decade plus now, is that the way that the work environment is and what brings us satisfaction and happiness and health is not the current mode. And it's great that that current mode got us here, but we can make that change. And we don't have to be large venture capitalists or hedge funds to make those changes, because those hedge funds and venture capitalists are investing in products that will eventually have some sort of currency exchange in which the public, some customers, will buy what is being created. And so just like you may think that Jeff Bezos has all the power in Amazon, sure, he has a lot and he's a shareholder too, but as a shareholder of Amazon, you have power over Amazon. It's a small amount, but you still have power. Same thing with your dollar. You may not be a millionaire and you may not be investing in these large funds, but with small intentional purchases, you start to shift the collective consciousness and create that ecosystem of an elevated life. And so the thought current that you cherish when you spend money is the most important indicator of what kind of reality you want to live in. So when you add it all up, the question is, do you want to manifest that reality now and spend that few extra 10% premium, or they call it tax, a health tax? Do you want to do that now, or do you want to maintain the status quo until some point at which something will happen outside of your control, and then you will have to embrace and adopt whatever that is? And that's what's happening, especially when you give your money to money managers, is you're essentially saying, hey, all this hard-earned money, I trust you as a money manager to make the right decision, to make money for me. And that manager is motivated strictly by the profit And so they'll focus on companies that are all about extracting profit. But when you look at us from a greater and greater order of coherence, is we are in a closed ecosystem ourselves. So whatever we're profiting on one area, we're extracting and exploiting in another area. And so by putting your money in these fund vehicles that are driven by performance alone and profitability, take a moment to think about what kind of future you actually are trying to create and what you are actually energetically supporting. Like if you are investing in a 401k or a Roth IRA that is specifically there to maximize profitability, you are essentially saying that with all your money, all your savings, and all your life, you wish to live in an ecosystem that maximizes profitability at regardless of the cost to the individual, to the consumer, and to the environment. Think about that. And we're creating different vehicles that specifically invest in things beyond just profitability that may be a less of a profitable return for you, but creates that ecosystem, that environment, that lifestyle that we all really want, rather than these winner take all kind of lifestyle that we're currently in. And so with that, I'd love to close and conclude with the story of Walmart. It's a very interesting story because lots of people love Walmart because they can buy lots of stuff at really low prices. People invest in Walmart because it's a huge company and was doing great. But then the employees were paid much less. So at some point, something in that equation's got to go. And if you are both the shareholder and the consumer, which we are the shareholder and consumer of this world, what do you want? Do you want a high profitable company? Do you want employees to be paid very well? Do you want your products to be lowest price? Or what I offer, and of course, you might say, well, Apple doesn't do this. Their employees get paid well, and the share, it's the most valuable thing. But they've been leveraging international workforce and creating incredible arbitrage off of that, which I won't go down the multi-order issues of that and how it's built up a monolithic empire in China that's taking over the world through its investments in South America, Africa, and the new Silk Road. Regardless of that, which has catastrophic implications, at least for certain people living a certain thought current that we are here in America, think about your money as a vote every time and start to deconstruct your purchase in terms of how that product, embodied in that product, is the workforce, is the environment, is the vendors and the ingredients that come in, is the space, is the customer service, right? And that's a huge component as well in the automation process, is does your company actually like you as a customer and value as a customer? They might say it, they may give you marketing, loyalty things, but they may have really crummy customer service. I mean, for example, Victoria here does incredible analysis and due diligence on all these different companies and will make purchasing decisions based on their return policy and customer policy. Because I guarantee you, what every company will want is your money. But do they actually want you as a loyal customer? And do their business practices and policies actually speak to that? And our generation and just this time period, because this isn't just specifically millennials, this is all awakened people, are requiring, and demanding that we do this, that we create systems that we call companies that will solve for all these variables. And one of the easiest ways that we can talk about how and why conscious awakening is important is very simple. It is that companies are now taking into consideration on a global scale more and more connections and understandings of the implications of their actions. So that way, it's not simply just the shareholders, the employees, and the customers, but it is the environment, the ecosystems that they're supporting, the education that is going to be required for the jobs that are being created, and the conscious brands that are being created, et cetera, et cetera. And when you go through traditional business school for the longest time, and even if you weren't in business school, the number one thing that people have been trained on is how to run a profit maximizing company. And so it is a challenge for business managers, owners, employees, and decision makers to be able to grasp and understand how to think about, process, and embody what it means that our society is requesting these more interconnected, conscious companies. And the best way to do that, of course, as I've mentioned, is upgrading your operating software. And if you look at simply just brain states, alpha, theta, delta, gamma, alpha, beta, theta, delta, gamma, yep, there are numerous studies done on incredible gurus and monks, Tibetan monks who've been meditating for years. And what they found is that when they go into a specific meditation, they enter into gamma state. And I myself am able to enter into gamma state. And we get into gamma state through Paramahansa Nityananda, through power manifesting, which can initiate you in like the first session. It's called Kalpataru session. It's like a weekend free session. But short of that, what gamma state does and what it shows is that you have incredible, profound realizations, clicks, and understanding and grasp of the implications of your thoughts, words, and actions, and your connection to ever more increasing orders of magnitude, which is exactly what the customers are requesting, exactly what the investors are looking for. And so if you are looking to be competitive in today's day and age, and not just competitive, but creative and collaborative in the corporate environment, in a company environment that is a collective energy specifically designed to bring in incredible talent, to create incredible ideas and products that take care and take into consideration ever more important and connected inputs, such as the environment and the messages and the education and training that we are moving towards. The number one training you can do is get into gamma state, which is meditation, which is consciousness. And there's incredible tools and biohacking tools that you can do it that can get you there. But you need experienced practitioners and you need a infrastructure and supportive group to help you get there. And that's it. And there's powerful techniques that you can actually leverage when you start talking about power manifesting that I have been able to, that I've been doing just unconsciously or unknowingly, just the profound impact. I call it the painted picture exercise, and we're able to actually leverage the highest intention and purpose for your business and help you elevate your vibe and be able to get into a near gamma state or gamma state to create what the future of your company is going to be at its highest expression that you can possibly bring as well, and then be able to break it down into specific tangible steps and ground it in a way that your current business environment can understand. And what's beautiful too is that there's this discussion about needing to bring in more femininity, age of Aquarius, this is the feminine power, and feminine in terms of the energy. And in a corporation, what drives it and what at large, for a vast majority of industries, is the innovation that comes. Because if you don't innovate, then you are done. Innovate or die. And you're seeing this with the companies who are on the S&P 500. Some of the largest companies who fail to innovate or adopt innovations are off it, and new companies who are able to embrace innovation are growing to be bigger than these companies that have been around for 40, 50, 80 years. And so innovation, when you are able to be guided by the experienced practitioners who are very anchored in a feminine expression and very balanced in their feminine expression, they can help you, guide you to a more feminine inspired innovation that your company can then adopt. And because we as a society are craving more feminine type energy in our innovations, it becomes a very profitable aspect. And then all of a sudden, that feminine energy that was put into the intention of the innovation starts to trickle through the company as well as the consumers, because they will start to resonate with more and more feminine energy. And venture capitalists are kind of talking about it with the need of having more diversity and more female decision makers in venture capital, which is a great proxy for it. But it's really about the energy of the invention or the energy of the intention that the entrepreneur is holding on to, the energy of the intention of the innovation that the corporation is working to create. And what's powerful is that there are incredible people out there who have gone through the spiritual awakening who can guide you through these painted picture exercises and hold space. They are like energetic shaman for your company. They guide you through this expansive process that you can then take to integrate into the DNA of your company and upgrade it into the where society is going and wants to go as well. So I'm an energetic shaman for corporations, and there's a lot of individuals like that. Because we've been there, we can help guide you, and we understand that this isn't just some exploration in the cosmos or some Burning Man without any clear intention behind it, with tons of delusion. This is a very intentional space with very clear, tangible outcomes that are being desired, with people who continuously practice the skills of guiding people to these painted pictures and being able to ground it all the way down to your KPIs and work schedule. So if you could consider this idea of going to an ashram or going to Burning Man and being so inspired by some idea that you pick up that you want to embody and enact, this is essentially what we're doing with corporations with this shamanism. And then there's one final point that I wanted to talk about, but I will talk about it on a new channel, revising a previous channel. It's called Faces of the Future, because this was something that I created almost 7 years ago and stumbled upon, and it's taken me 7 years to really understand what the power is that I was creating. Because one of the things that we had talked about was, well, I guess I'll hold it for the Faces of the Future. I'm getting a strong sign to hold off on it. So with that, I thank you for your love, respect, appreciation, and gratitude. Today we covered the currency and the thought currents that you currently value is how you make purchasing decisions. You, regardless of how much money you have the power of what kind of ecosystem you wish to create and co-create. And it is the ultimate manifestation tool, is money. We talked about how Bitcoin is actually a way to soak up energy supply and how it may not necessarily be the best approach. We talked about how it also was supporting a robotic future. And it also plays with the tipping point adoption of solar energy and renewable energy. And then we talked about the corporations and innovation and how we can really use these quantum mechanisms to bring about the enlightened ecosystem together in an open infrastructure outside of a closed ashram-like environment. And then I mentioned the exciting rebirth of Phases of the Future, which is really the embodiment and the collective efforts of where all of this is leading to, and very grateful for the 7-year journey that it has brought me on when I stumbled upon it and presented it to African presidents and delegates of the United Nations. So, with that, I thank you, and I'll talk to you later. Have a great Thanksgiving. It's Thanksgiving, so happy Thanksgiving. Very grateful for everything. So much to be grateful for. All right, bye.